Hello, everyone. This is Will with PragerU. Today we're joined with Dr. Susan Crockford. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Sunny day here.
In Canada, right?
Yeah.
And so we are contacting you today because we put out at PragerU a post recently that talked about polar bear populations. We posted it on Facebook, basically claiming that polar bear populations across the world are actually growing, or at least not shrinking at the rate that the left likes to talk about they're shrinking. And Facebook labeled this post as false information. And so we cited a lot of your studies, a lot of your sources in that post to make our claim. What is your response to Facebook claiming that it is false information?
Well, I mean, the video was pretty simple and straightforward. I thought it presented. It talked about the National Geographic starving polar bear issue very briefly, and then presented three inconvenient facts. And it seemed to me from the what Facebook was doing was posting, linking to a review done by an outfit called Climate Feedback. And in that review, two polar bear scientists were presenting arguments for why these three presented facts were wrong. But the one that seemed to me to really stick, that they seemed to be the most upset by, was the one that said polar bears are thriving even where sea ice is diminishing. And my point was that the data are contradictory. There are indeed several polar bear subpopulations that are indeed thriving. And in fact, two of them were mentioned by the researchers that were reviewing it. They talked about the Barents Sea polar bears and the Chukchi sea bears. But what they said was that, oh, well, those bears are doing okay. Well, in fact, the literature on those populations is quite emphatic that those populations are doing better than just okay. They're doing much better than they were doing in the 80s or the 90s, and that they, in fact, are in excellent physical health, despite the fact, particularly for the Barents Sea, that the ice is, more than 50% lower than it has been in previous decades. So, and then there's two others that were that the biologists said were doing okay: Fox Basin and Davis Strait, and two others that are listed as being increasing: so Kane Basin and McClintock Channel. So that gives us six populations that are in fact doing well or increasing in size. And those bears are indeed thriving. That they're, their premise that polar bear numbers would decline was based on an assumption that polar bear body condition and reproduction would be doing poorly and would be declining, and that would cause the numbers to go down. But if the bear body condition and reproductive rates are doing well, then that really assumes that the population is in fact increasing, even if it's only increasing slowly. Whereas the polar bear biologists prefer to focus on the few populations that seem to be fitting their predictions of a dire outcome for declining sea ice. So it really is kind of a conflict that you see in science. That's really a matter of opinion, or the way that you look at the same data. And my take on that, as far as the Facebook labeling it as false information, was that they were taking sides, that they took a side that they preferred, but that the information that was presented by the biologist didn't prove that in fact I was wrong, or that the statements that were in your video were incorrect.
Yeah, it almost seems like the data on this is not, obviously science is always, or should be at least, always up for debate, so it's not 100%. But instead of Facebook or these fact checkers doing their due diligence, they just instead go with the mainstream narrative of what it's supposed to be. Why do you think that a Facebook or any sort of these biologists, maybe with an agenda, would do something like that?
Well, the whole climate change narrative has for a long time depended on the prediction that polar bear numbers were going to decline because of declining sea ice. And it's that whole premise is what got a lot of the general public on board. And what's happened now is that the prediction that 2/3 of the world's bears were going to be gone by the middle of the century are simply blown apart. It's turned out to be a false prediction, and it's made everyone really defensive about it because the polar bear is no longer really an operable icon for climate change anymore.
And they continue to push it anyway. It's like,
Yes.
even if they've lost the argument, or they don't have those straws to really grab it anymore, they continue to do so and push it until there really is nothing else that they can do.
Well, and it's interesting that two of the people that are pushing that agenda quite strongly are one of the ones that had participated in this review, and that's Canadian biologist Ian Sterling, and the other one is American biologist Stephen Amstrup. And the thing is, both of those men are at the end of their careers. They've retired, and they really see this getting the polar bear listed as threatened or endangered as being their legacy issue. And that's how they want to remember. They want people to remember them for that job that they did. And they're really refusing to let go, even though they have been shown to be wrong. And they should be able to say, okay, we made a mistake, let's, shift on and move on to something else. But they seem not to be able to do that. Yeah. I think they're too emotionally invested. And that is always a mistake in science.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems in science today that, we've talked with you, and I've talked in terms of other things we're doing, and lots of other scientists about data where they might disagree on just one little thing about, a certain data point or something that goes against the mainstream narrative. And as soon as they do, they get lambasted, ostracized for their opinion, or from their community for whatever reason, just for even just the tiniest degree of
Yeah.
difference of thought. And that's
Yeah.
a really scary thing. And it is very emotional.
Yes, indeed. And, it's a hard thing to do. And I think, it's one of the things that I think allows me to maintain my emotional distance, to keep that emotional distance that is required, is because I don't go out and handle bears. I think it's easy when you're handling little cubs that look like little teddy bears to get all wound up in that sort of emotional connection. And, we need those people to do that work, but you also need people who don't have that connection, who can look at the data and who can look at the big picture and look at it dispassionately and see these kinds of things to point out, to say, well, why are Barents Sea and Chukchi bears doing so well when you're trying to say that, Western Hudson Bay bears are doing poorly? But you're blaming sea ice for both of the conditions, and you've got lowered sea ice in both areas, but one's going down and the other ones are going up, or doing really well. So it really shines a spotlight on the veracity of their claims, that it doesn't hold up for them to be able to be saying, if sea ice goes down, the bears are going to be in trouble. That's clearly hasn't been shown to be the case.
Yeah, and they're just going to continue to push the narrative. I really appreciate you coming on and having this chat with us and talking about it. We got so many messages from people just
really
all the past days,
yeah.
just, saying, this post, we can't see it, or there's this false information thing, and it's concerning to a lot of people. When they're on a huge social media platform like Facebook, where they have their friends and there's, millions and millions of users, just to them be able to to say, oh, this thing that disagrees with our narrative, our point of view, we can say it's false information.
Yes.
It's a really scary thing for a lot of people.
Yes, and that's why I wrote an extensive blog post that people can go to. My blog is called Polar Bear Science, and so I've got all of the references there so people can look up this information and see and judge for themselves. And that's what it should always do.
And we're going to link that in the post of this, so you guys can check that out there, and make sure you give it a read so that you know that we are not false information and we are putting out the correct information. And once again, thank you so much for coming on all the way from Canada. And I appreciate you guys watching this. If you guys like this video, make sure you share with your friends to get the real information out there. Comment your thoughts down below. We're going to see you in the next one. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for watching this video. PragerU is a 501c3 organization. Help us keep our videos free by making a tax-deductible donation today. I'd really appreciate your support.